late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty trail as Jacob, the solitary rancher, tightened his grip on the reins. His heart pounded like a wild drum in his chest, each beat echoing the fear and hope swirling inside him. Ahead lay the village, quiet, yet alive with a distant hum of voices and movement. Today wasn't just another visit. Today he intended to ask Marissa, the woman who had quietly captured his soul, to marry him. The thought alone made his hands tremble, but what he didn't expect was the storm waiting beyond those simple wooden fences. As Jacob rode closer, the village seemed to hold its breath. Suddenly, a low rumble stirred the earth, no ordinary sound, but the thunder of hundreds of footsteps. From the tree line emerged an imposing mass of figures. 500 warriors, their faces painted, eyes blazing with a fierce intensity, armed with spears, bows, and shields. They moved like a living wall, shaking the very ground beneath Jacob's horse's hooves. His pulse surged with adrenaline, the calm he sought shattered by the overwhelming show of force. Marissa stood at the village entrance, her expression unreadable as the warriors gathered around her like a protective storm. Jacob called out softly, trying to calm his voice, "I come with respect and a simple wish to ask for your hand in marriage." But the warrior's presence spoke louder than words. The air thickened with tension, every eye locked on the stranger. Who dared step into sacred land with such an audacious request? Jacob felt the weight of centuries pressing down on him, a history neither he nor Marissa could ignore. Whispers and murmurs rippled through the crowd, a language old as the land itself. Elders exchanged glances heavy with meaning, while younger warriors tightened their grips on weapons. Jacob sensed the fragile barrier between peace and conflict was thin, trembling on the edge of a blade. He swallowed hard, wondering what had sparked this overwhelming reaction. Was it fear, anger, or something deeper, something born from wounds too old to heal easily? Marissa stepped forward, her voice calm but carrying an unyielding strength. "Jacob, your words honor me, but our people carry scars from those who came before you. Your proposal is not just between us, it challenges the history written in blood and betrayal." Her gaze held his, steady and fierce, revealing a turmoil that mirrored his own. Jacob realized that winning her heart meant more than love. It meant confronting a legacy that neither side wanted to face, but both were bound to. The warrior's presence was a message, clear and uncompromising. This was not a matter to be taken lightly. Their silhouettes against the fading light were a reminder of protection, pride, and a promise that any threat to their way of life would be met with force. Jacob's mind raced as he weighed his next steps, caught between respect and the need to prove himself worthy. Every second stretched like a lifetime in the charged silence that settled over the village. Despite the danger, a flicker of hope remained. Marissa's eyes softened just a fraction, hinting that beneath the armor of tradition, there was room for something new. Jacob understood that this was a crossroads, not just for their hearts, but for two worlds on the brink of collision or connection. He raised his voice once more, steadying his nerves. "I seek only to build a future with you, not to bring war or division." The words hung in the air, fragile as a thread but filled with earnest intention. As night began to fall, the village stood still, warriors poised like statues, watching and waiting. Jacob's lonely journey had led him to this moment, a test of courage, love, and understanding that would shape not only his fate, but the fate of the people whose land he dared to enter. The answer, carried by the silent strength of 500 warriors, was yet to come. Jacob stood before the village elders, his hands open and voice calm, trying to convey respect and honesty. "I only want to honor Marissa and your people," he said carefully, hoping to bridge the vast gap between them. But the weight of history hung thick in the air. The elders exchanged looks heavy with suspicion. To them, Jacob's presence was a reminder of years marked by broken treaties and stolen lands. Their silence was loud, filled with unspoken grievances that made peaceful words fragile and easily shattered. One elder, a stern man with deep lines etched by decades of hardship, stepped forward. "Your intentions may sound pure, but history teaches us to be cautious. Our ancestors bled fighting those who sought to take what was ours. How can we trust that your words today are different?" His voice was steady but fierce, carrying the burden of his people's suffering. Jacob felt the weight of generations bearing down on his shoulders, realizing this wasn't just about love, it was about survival and respect for a wounded past. The crowd grew restless as whispers of doubt and anger rippled through the warriors and villagers alike. Some saw Jacob as a threat, an outsider trying to claim what was sacred. Others were curious, sensing something genuine beneath the fear. Marissa watched from the side, torn between her love for Jacob and her loyalty to her tribe. The tension in the air was electric, a fragile thread that could either snap or strengthen. Pride and pain battled silently beneath every word spoken in the circle. Jacob tried to explain the rancher's way of life, a simple existence tied to the land and hard work, not conquest or greed. "I am not like the men who came before me," he said. "I want to build a life with Marissa, alongside her people." But the elders' faces were etched with memories of betrayal, and his words felt like drops of water on dry stone, slowly eroding but not yet convincing. The cultural divide was wider than he imagined. and each attempt at understanding met walls built by history and hurt. A younger leader, fierce and proud, challenged Jacob directly. Love is not enough when the past is filled with pain. We protect what is ours with every breath. How will you honor our ways, our traditions? His question was sharp, a test of sincerity and respect. Jacob swallowed hard and met his gaze, knowing that words alone would not heal these wounds. Actions would be needed, proof that he could live by their customs and values, not just his own. The elders gathered privately, debating fiercely. Their voices were low but passionate, voices raised in concern and caution. Some argued for acceptance, believing the proposal might open a new chapter of peace and unity. Others feared it would invite division and betrayal. This was more than a marriage, it was a choice about the future of their people. Their struggles with pride, honor, and fear made the decision almost unbearable. A weight shared by all. Jacob felt the isolation of being caught between two worlds, the ranch that was his home and the village that was Marissa's heart. Both sides had their loyalties and doubts, their scars and hopes. He realized that winning acceptance would be a long, uncertain path. Yet, he could not turn back now. The desire to unite these worlds burned within him, stronger than the barriers built by history and pain. As night fell again, the village settled into uneasy quiet. The warriors remained vigilant, the elders deep in thought. Jacob's peaceful intentions had been met with suspicion and resistance, but beneath the surface, small cracks appeared, the beginnings of understanding, fragile but real. The clash of cultures and conflicting loyalties would not be resolved icily, but the story was far from over. The real test of love and respect had only just begun. Marissa stood apart from the crowd, her heart pounding with a storm of emotions she could no longer hide. The weight of her people's expectations clashed violently with the secret feelings she held for Jacob. Each glance she stole toward him was a fragile thread of hope, woven through years of silence and distance. Yet the eyes of her tribe remained, sharp and watchful, reminding her that love in these times was not just a matter of the heart. It was a risk that could ignite conflict and deepen wounds already raw. In the quiet moments away from the prying gaze of warriors and elders, Marissa found Jacob waiting, his expression a mixture of longing and fear. "I never asked for this battle between us," she whispered, voice trembling, "but my heart refuses to lie." Their fingers brushed briefly, an electric touch charged with tension and unspoken promises. Yet even in these stolen moments, the shadow of war loomed large, reminding them that their love was not theirs alone to claim. The village's protective stance hardened daily, fueled by stories passed down through generations, stories warning of outsiders and betrayals. Marissa wrestled with her conscience, torn between allegiance to her people's fierce loyalty and the forbidden desire to be with Jacob. Every smile she gave him was a silent rebellion, every touch a quiet defiance. The cost of love felt impossibly high, but the alternative, denying her heart, felt like a slow death. Jacob understood the danger better than anyone. He had witnessed the warrior's suspicion, the elders' harsh debates, and the deep-rooted scars etched into the land. Yet, he refused to let fear dictate his fate. "We don't have to be enemies," he pleaded one night under the stars. "There can be a future where we both belong." Marissa's eyes glistened with tears, caught between hope and despair. Their love was a fragile flame flickering against the winds of history and tradition. Rumors of the proposal and the gathering warriors spread beyond the village, stirring unrest in nearby settlements. Neighbors watched anxiously, some preparing for violence, others praying for peace. The tension crackled like static electricity in the air, each day a countdown to an unknown reckoning. Marissa and Jacob felt the pressure mounting, their relationship a powder keg threatening to explode beneath the surface of fragile diplomacy. Despite the chaos, moments of tenderness broke through the storm. Late at night, they shared whispered dreams of a life together, simple, peaceful, and free from fear. These fleeting visions were a sanctuary, a place where love could breathe and grow, even if just for a moment. But dawn would always bring the harsh light of reality, reminding them that their connection was not just a private affair but a spark in a tinderbox of history and pride. The village elders tightened their grip, warning Marissa of the consequences of crossing boundaries. "Your heart may yearn, but your duty is to your people," one elder cautioned, voice heavy with sorrow. Marissa's soul ached with the weight of choice between love and loyalty, desire and tradition. The path forward was fraught with peril, yet her resolve deepened. Love, she believed, was worth the fight, even if it meant standing alone against a storm. As the warriors sharpened their weapons and tensions mounted, the fragile threads holding the village together began to strain. Marissa and Jacob stood at the crossroads of history and hope, their forbidden love a beacon and a warning. The battle lines were drawn not just on the land, but in the hearts of those caught between the past's demands and the future's possibilities. Their story was no longer theirs alone. It belonged to all who dared to dream of peace amid fire. Beneath the simmering tension, whispers began to weave through the village like smoke from a long-forgotten fire. An old betrayal buried beneath years of silence started to resurface, casting shadows over the fragile negotiations. The elders exchanged wary glances when the name of Jacob's family came up, their memories sharp and unforgiving. The history Between the rancher's bloodline and the tribe was tangled in pain, promises broken, and wounds that refused to heal. This past no one dared speak aloud now threatened to unravel everything. Jacob listened with growing unease as rumors spread of a betrayal that had once torn the two peoples apart. His father's name was dragged into the mud, a man accused of stealing sacred land and betraying sacred trusts. The stories were bitter, told in hushed voices around fires, their edges sharpened by years of resentment. Though Jacob had grown up hearing only fragments, the full weight of history pressed down on him now. His proposal was no longer just a personal plea, it was a challenge to a legacy steeped in mistrust. The tribe's warriors grew restless, their eyes darkened by the shadows of history. What had seemed like a hopeful chance for unity was now stained with suspicion and fear. Some elders insisted that any alliance with the rancher's family would be a repeat of past mistakes, a betrayal waiting to happen. Others, though fewer, clung to hope that Jacob was different, that the sins of the father need not be inherited by the son. This divide deepened the fractures within the community, making peace seem more distant than ever. Adding to the turmoil was the unexpected arrival of an outsider traveler from a distant town who claimed knowledge of the old feud. His presence stirred the pot further as he whispered half-truths and fueled doubts on both sides. Was he a spy sent to sabotage the fragile peace, or a seeker of truth aiming to heal old wounds? Neither tribe nor rancher fully trusted him, but his words sowed confusion like seeds in a storm. Every conversation became laced with suspicion, every gesture questioned. Jacob confronted the outsider cautiously, demanding to know his purpose. The traveler spoke of forgotten agreements, hidden betrayals, and lost honor details that neither side wanted to revisit but couldn't ignore. He warned that the past was not dead. It was a living force that could either bind them or break them apart. Jacob felt the weight of those words, realizing that the battle for acceptance was more than a personal struggle. It was a fight to rewrite a history marred by pain. Meanwhile, Marissa wrestled with the growing discord. Her heart ached as she watched her people divided, the trust she hoped for slipping further away. She feared that the secrets beneath the surface would poison any chance of love or peace. The stories of betrayal haunted her family, and she feared that uncovering them might tear them apart. Yet, ignoring the past seemed impossible. The truth demanded reckoning, even if it brought suffering. As nights grew colder, the village sat restless, the ancient wounds bleeding through every whispered word. Jacob and Marissa found themselves caught in a storm of history and suspicion, their relationship strained by forces far beyond their control. Trust, once fragile, seemed almost impossible to rebuild. But beneath the bitterness, a small spark of determination endured, an unspoken vow to face the past together, no matter the cost. The old betrayal, the hidden motives, and the arrival of the outsider cast long shadows, threatening to engulf their fragile world. Yet, in the darkest moments, the possibility of healing flickered faintly, a chance to break free from the chains of history and build something new. The path ahead was uncertain and perilous, but Jacob and Marissa stood united, ready to confront the secrets beneath the surface and fight for a future that refused to be defined by the past. The warriors encircled Jacob's ranch like a shadow, tightening around its prey. Tents sprung up beneath towering trees, fires flickered in the gathering dusk, and the air grew thick with unspoken warnings. The silent siege was not just a show of force, it was a declaration. With every guarded glance and measured movement, the village sent a clear message. Trust had frayed to the breaking point. Jacob watched from his porch, heart heavy, knowing that peace balanced precariously on a knife's edge, and the coming days could shatter it all. Negotiations began cautiously, with envoys shuttling between the camp and village elders. Words were chosen with care, each phrase carrying weight far beyond its surface meaning. Though both sides sought to avoid open conflict, every sentence dripped with mistrust. Past betrayals cast long shadows, making even the simplest offers seem like traps. Jacob tried to speak with honesty and humility, but the skepticism was relentless, and every concession felt like a step into uncertain territory. Days turned into restless nights as the siege dragged on. The community around the ranch grew tense. Neighbors whispered fears of violence and heartbreak. Farmers paused their work, children played quietly in the shadows, and elders muttered prayers to gods old and new. The weight of impending conflict pressed down on everyone, transforming everyday moments into a delicate dance of survival. Jacob felt the burden keenly, torn between defending his home and proving he meant no harm. Inside the village, the elders debated fiercely. Some urged patience, hoping that reason might yet prevail. Others called for strength, warning that yielding could invite disaster. The young warriors, restless and proud, paced under the stars, their fingers twitching near weapons sharpened for battle. The air crackled with tension as fear and hope tangled in uneasy balance. Every heartbeat was a countdown, every breath a question. Who would blink first? Marissa moved between her people and Jacob's camp, a fragile bridge caught in the storm. Her presence was a bomb, but also a lightning rod for suspicion. She carried messages of peace and reminders of shared dreams, yet the gulf seemed to widen each day. Her eyes betrayed the pain of watching love and trust unravel under the weight of history. Every moment together was precious and precarious, shadowed by the threat of war that lurked just beyond their reach. In the ranch house, Jacob spent long hours staring at the horizon, imagining the future. He wanted a life with Marissa, free from fear and bloodshed. But the siege was a constant reminder that dreams could be shattered with a single misstep. Each crack of a twig outside, each murmured conversation from the camp, sent a jolt through his body. The silence between negotiations was filled with a growing storm, and Jacob knew the fragile peace might break without warning. The village's animals grew restless, sensing the unease, and the once peaceful land felt charged with tension. The warriors held their positions, silent sentinels waiting for a sign, any sign that would tip the scales toward battle or peace. The community watched and waited, caught in a suspended moment where futures hung in balance. For Jacob and Marissa, every day was a test of endurance, love, and faith in a future that seemed more fragile than ever. As the siege wore on, the standstill became a heavy weight on everyone's shoulders. Neither side could claim victory yet. Neither could yield without risking everything they held dear. The air was thick with possibility and peril, and the smallest spark could ignite a fire no one could control. In that tense silence, Jacob and Marissa clung to the hope that love might be the bridge to a new dawn, a dawn that could break through the long, dark night of distrust and fear. Amidst the tension and looming threat of conflict, small acts of courage began to quietly shift the atmosphere. One morning, Jacob ventured beyond the fence that marked his ranch's edge, seeking out a group of young warriors training nearby. His approach was cautious, hands visible and voice steady. To everyone's surprise, a few of the warriors welcomed his presence with wary curiosity rather than hostility. What began as awkward exchanges slowly grew into tentative conversations, bridging a divide thought too wide to cross. Marissa watched these moments with a fragile hope. She knew the stakes were high, and any misstep could shatter the fragile peace they had. Yet, seeing Jacob and members of her tribe share stories and laughter in stolen moments was a balm to her weary heart. These friendships, born from vulnerability and honesty, whispered of a future where their worlds might not only coexist but intertwine. It was a quiet rebellion against the bitterness that had held them captive for so long. The elders remained cautious, some openly skeptical of these budding alliances, but even hardened voices could not ignore the subtle changes unfolding. When a young warrior offered to help tend Jacob's injured horse after a storm left it limping, the gesture spoke louder than words. It was an unspoken promise that kindness could transcend history, that trust could be built brick by brick, moment by moment. Jacob felt a stirring of optimism he hadn't dared to hope for. One evening, beneath the vast sky streaked with stars, Jacob and Marissa found themselves surrounded by a small group of mixed company tribal warriors and ranch hands alike. Stories flowed freely. Tales of childhood dreams, lost loves, and hopes for a world without fear. For a brief time, the weight of siege and suspicion lifted, replaced by shared laughter and the simple joy of human connection. It was a fragile moment, but a powerful one. Word of these meetings slowly spread through the community, stirring both hope and controversy. Some villagers saw the friendships as betrayals, while others saw them as the first steps toward healing. The divide was still deep, but the lines were beginning to blur. Jacob and Marissa became symbols not just of forbidden love, but of a broader possibility. That courage could create bridges where none seemed possible as trust grew. The rancher and the warriors began to share skills and knowledge. Jacob taught some how to tend crops with new techniques, while tribal members showed him how to read the land's subtle signs, secrets passed down for generations. These exchanges fostered respect and understanding, planting seeds of unity in soil long hardened by conflict. The community's heartbeat shifted from fear to cautious hope. Marissa often reflected on how far they had come, yet she knew the journey was far from over. Every act of courage was a fragile thread in a tapestry still vulnerable to unraveling. But she also believed that these unexpected allies, forged in adversity, were proof that change was possible. Love had sparked the first flame, but it was bravery and trust that kept it burning. In the growing quiet between storms, Jacob and Marissa stood side by side, their hands clasped tightly. Around them, new friendships blossomed, and the community began to breathe differently as if freed from a long-held breath. The siege was still not over, but the walls between them had started to crack, revealing a path forward illuminated by courage and the unlikely bonds of kinship. The deadlock between the rancher and the tribe stretched into endless days of tense silence and guarded eyes. Jacob knew that waiting was a luxury they no longer had. Something drastic had to be done to break the impasse, to show that his intentions were genuine and that love could conquer even the deepest divides. He spent restless nights crafting a plan, one that was risky, possibly reckless, but necessary if there was to be any hope for peace and unity between their worlds. The plan was simple in concept but dangerous in execution. Jacob would offer a symbolic gesture, deeply meaningful to the tribe. He would present a sacred gift, one that had been lost to his family for generations. Retrieving this artifact meant venturing into land long forbidden, a place marked by peril and haunted memories. Many warned him against such a gamble, but Jacob's resolve was ironclad. This was more than a proposal, it was a test of trust, and he would risk everything on it. Marissa watched the preparation with a mixture of hope and dread. She knew what was at stake. If Jacob succeeded, he might open a path to reconciliation. If he failed, the fragile bonds could shatter beyond repair. Her heart ached with the weight of the choice facing her people. She urged the elders to consider forgiveness, to see beyond past wounds, but their faces were shadowed by centuries of pain. The decision was no longer hers alone, it belonged to the entire tribe. As Jacob set out, the village held its breath. Warriors shadowed his path, wary yet silent. The journey through treacherous terrain tested his strength and spirit. Each step deeper into the forbidden lands was a step into the unknown, where danger lurked not only in the wild but also in the memories of betrayal. The sacred gift was a symbol of his family's broken promises, and reclaiming it was a way to prove he was ready to make amends, to build something new from the ruins of the past. Meanwhile, tensions in the village grew unbearable. Debates erupted over whether Jacob's gamble was foolish or brave. Some feared it was a trap, a final test before open conflict. Others saw in it a glimmer of hope, a chance to heal ancient wounds. Marissa found herself at the center of these stormy discussions, her loyalties tested as never before, the tribe's future balanced on a knife's edge, poised between reconciliation and ruin. Jacob's return was marked by both triumph and uncertainty. Clutching the sacred gift, he stepped into the village amidst a charged silence. The elders inspected the artifact with reverence and suspicion, weighing the meaning behind the gesture. Jacob's hands trembled, knowing that this moment could either mend the rift or ignite the fires of old hatred. Marissa's eyes searched his field with a fragile hope that this dangerous gamble had not been in vain. In the days that followed, the village held a council unlike any before. Voices rose and fell as the elders debated the implications of Jacob's act. Stories of betrayal mingled with stories of forgiveness, old wounds confronted alongside new possibilities. The community was divided, torn between the instinct to protect and the yearning for peace. The tension was palpable, a collective breath held in anticipation of a choice that would shape their destiny. Marissa's plea echoed through the council chambers, her voice steady and full of conviction. She spoke of love's power to transcend history, of the courage needed to embrace change. Her words struck chords in hearts both young and old, planting seeds of trust where suspicion had ruled. But the path ahead was uncertain, and the tribe's decision would not come easily. The turning point had arrived, a moment when hope and fear collided in a delicate balance. As night fell over the village, the air thick with anticipation, the outcome remained unknown. Jacob and Marissa stood together, united by their shared gamble. Whatever the tribe decided, their bond had already changed the course of history. The dangerous risk had opened a door to a future where love might rewrite the stories of the past. But the question lingered, would trust be enough to heal the wounds, or would the past's shadow fall once more, plunging them back into violence? The fragile peace that had begun to take root was shattered in an instant. A whisper of betrayal spread like wildfire through the village and the ranch, igniting fears long buried beneath cautious hope. Someone close to Jacob was accused of conspiring against the tribe, leaking secrets that endangered the delicate balance they had fought so hard to build. The news hit like a thunderclap, fracturing the tentative trust and plunging both sides back into suspicion and anger. Marissa's heart broke as she watched the growing divide tear through her people. The faces she once saw softened by hope hardened again with doubt and betrayal. Her pleas for calm fell on deaf ears, drowned out by calls for justice and retribution. The warriors tightened their grips on weapons, ready to defend their honor and their land. What had been a budding peace now seemed like a cruel illusion, slipping through their fingers as quickly as it had arrived. Jacob was stunned by the accusations, feeling the weight of betrayal not just on his name but on the future he had dared to imagine. He struggled to prove his innocence while grappling with the possibility that someone in his camp had truly broken faith. The sense of isolation was crushing, and even Marissa's unwavering support could not shield him from the growing storm. Every whispered suspicion was a dagger aimed at the fragile bond they had built. The elders convened again, their voices sharp and tense. Some demanded harsh punishment for the traitor, others urged restraint, fearing that harsh reprisals would only deepen the wounds. The village was at a crossroads, unsure if reconciliation was still within reach or if the old patterns of violence and mistrust were doomed to repeat. The community's fragile unity teetered on the brink of collapse, held only by the faintest thread of hope amid the chaos. Marissa sought out Jacob in private, her eyes filled with pain but also determination. "We cannot let this break us," she said quietly. "Love and trust are fragile, but they are worth fighting for." Their stolen moments became lifelines, small islands of connection in a sea of uncertainty. Yet even their bond was tested by the growing suspicion and the fear that their worlds might be destined to collide in violence once again. Rumors spread quickly, twisting truths and inflaming old wounds. Neighbors turned wary, friendships fractured, and alliances shifted like sand beneath stormy skies. The past's shadow loomed large, reminding everyone that peace was not just about words but about actions and forgiveness, things in short supply. The weight of betrayal settled heavily on the village and the ranch alike, casting doubt on whether the cycle of mistrust could ever be broken. Despite the turmoil, a small group of elders and warriors worked quietly and secretly to heal the rift between the rancher's family and the tribe. Though met with skepticism, their belief that peace was possible never wavered. Slowly and with great care, they began to rebuild bridges, aware that the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. Their courage was a quiet rebellion against despair, planting the first seeds of hope for a future without violence. As night fell, the village was wrapped in uneasy silence. The fragile peace hung by a thread, and every moment was heavy with the question: could trust survive betrayal, or would violence return to reclaim the land? For Jacob and Marissa, the future was uncertain. Yet their determination to fight for a better tomorrow burned brighter than ever. Hope flickered in the darkness, fragile but unyielding. Tensions reached a boiling point, with warriors preparing for battle on both sides. The final confrontation erupted beneath a blood-red sunset, arrows flying and shields clashing as old grievances sparked new wounds. Amid the chaos, Jacob fought with desperate grace, not just for survival but as a plea for understanding and peace. Marissa fought fiercely too, torn between loyalty to her people and love for Jacob, embodying the fragile bridge between two worlds. Sacrifice came swiftly when a trusted elder took a fatal blow meant for Jacob, shaking both communities. This selfless act forced warriors on both sides to reconsider what they truly defended. Seizing a moment of clarity, Jacob called for a ceasefire, and leaders met to parley. Old enemies shared stories of loss and hope, allowing a fragile truce to form. Marissa's steady voice urged her people to embrace healing, inspiring warriors to lower their weapons and kindle a new hope. As the sun set, the village and ranch began tending wounds, both physical and emotional. The price of war was clear, but so was the path forward. Reconciliation would be neither easy nor quick, but it was possible. Jacob and Marissa, bound by love and sacrifice, stood as living proof that even the deepest divides could be bridged. Under the darkening sky, quiet promises were made to honor the past and build a future where trust could flourish, a fragile, unbreakable flame lighting the way ahead.